the Trump administration is planning to significantly weaken federal rules that would have forced Americans to use more energy efficient light bulbs. And it would eliminate requirements that effectively meant that most light bulbs in the United States had to be either LEDs or fluorescent to meet the new efficiency standards. And surprise, surprise, environmentalists are up in arms saying that this is going to increase CO2 emissions. And of course, because they're very concerned with costs, that this will cost Americans money. It's funny that they worry about costs whenever it's in their favor, and whenever they want to impose incredible costs, it's, well, you have to, we don't need to talk about those. But in any case, while it's true that high efficiency lights like LEDs can reduce energy costs, it's also important to keep in mind that they also have upfront costs that are higher, and that for a particular consumer and a particular use, they might not make up that purchase price for a long time, and maybe not at all. And so the way that I think about this is, look, light bulbs are not necessarily the most important thing in the world. It's not necessarily a hill to die on, but this is definitely illustrative of just the central planning mentality of the Greens, that in the real world, each of us as individuals faces a unique cost-benefit analysis. Like, it's not light bulbs in general, but I'm selecting them for particular use where maybe LEDs are more expensive, and I have to make a judgment about, will it lower my costs in my case over what time? And then it's not only financial costs that I can be concerned with, like aesthetics is a real value. And I can have real reasons for thinking that, no, I want a traditional kind of light bulb for whatever reason. And the whole central planning mentality says, no, we're going to make a one-size-fits-all decision, and your judgment is completely irrelevant. And then once you have that, then it becomes a real question. Well, like, okay, well, what if this central planner is wrong? And, what if they're wrong not just about like the cost or value of a light bulb, but, say the affordability and reliability of solar and wind? One of the reasons why individual choice is so vital is, like, you get to direct your life, but also you take responsibility for your choices, so that, if you get something wrong, you're the one who pays the price. Whereas when you have these kind of collective decision-making actions, it's you have a bunch of people who don't bear responsibility for their choices and are able to impose responsibility, their choices, on others. And God only knows what their incentives are and the quality of their judgment. A further thought on this is, we've had a few pieces of good news recently. The Clean Power Plan is being rolled back. Methane rules rolled back. We have, this light bulb, a few other things that the Trump administration has done to try to slightly reduce, the some of the environmental regulations that have been strangling business. But on the other hand, what we have is, on the other side, is people competing for how fast they can just outlaw fossil fuels and take totalitarian control over energy and the economy. And that it's that latter side that is positioned as idealistic and has the high ground. And so, as much as there are these kind of good things happening at a very minor level, the overall trend, I think, is really frightening. And you can't rely on any administration making these kinds of small changes in today's context, as you need a dramatic change in the culture's evaluation of our energy alternatives and ultimately of their ideal. Because so long as you have a culture where the ideal is not impacting nature and people are not taught to look at the full context of our energy choices, then the best you're going to be able to do is slightly loosen the noose for a few years until the other side gets into power, and then, has the opportunity to strangle everybody way more. And it just becomes extremely hard to undo. And so, not to be pessimistic, but I think it's good to keep in mind as we're considering something like a light bulb ban, that this, you have to see it in the context of the bigger picture and of the need to really profoundly change how people think about all these issues rather than see it solely on its own merits. Steffen, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I was a big opponent of the mandate for compact fluorescent light bulbs because they had such a bad lighting quality. And so people argued that you could actually save money with them. I'm not so sure that was true. But it's really important that you can, make your own decision because, as you said, governments can make wrong decisions and not all decisions make sense for every consumer. So how would a bureaucrat know whether I need a compact fluorescent or an LED or an incandescent light bulb? And just recently, I read something about a new development where researchers made an incandescent light bulb, multiple times as efficient as the original version of that. So it's now in, closer to LEDs and other things than before. And so the bureaucracy will probably not react to that until years after and takes this into consideration. So I think everyone has an incentive to choose the best light source that they need. And I'm very happy with my LED spots in my ceiling right now that I'm sitting beneath. So and I'm as much use as much energy as you can advocate as there is. And I still prefer the LEDs, not so much because they're efficient, but because they look really great. And I think they will save me money in the long term. But yeah, it's important that we make our own decisions and that the government doesn't centrally plan the economy because that's always a disaster. And I think it's a mood thing now, but there shouldn't be any kind of regulation on that. Like it's not going to hold the progress. So there's not someone who says, well, I will use a microchip from the 1980s because it uses more energy. That's not going to happen. So people will make good choices for themselves, for their own money. And I don't see any reason why there should be any kind of regulation of light bulbs.